Welcome to Front Office Pros, brought to you by the Front Office Pros, Steve and Joe. The NFL season is less than 2 months away, and today we're going to be having a divisional breakdown discussion surrounding the AFC North. With us today for the AFC North Breakdown is a special guest making his first appearance on Front Office Pros, which is none other than Andrew Hall. Andrew is a writer at Fantasy Pros and a part of the Dynasty Junkies podcast. Andrew, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Oh, thanks for having me. And anytime I get to talk about my AFC North Bengals, I'm always a fan of that. So let's do it. I'm excited to chat it up with you guys.
Hike.
All right, guys. So last season, the AFC North standings was as follows. The Cincinnati Bengals, your Cincinnati Bengals, Andrew, were 12-4, the division champions. Then the Baltimore Ravens were second. They got a wild card spot at 10-7. Third was the Pittsburgh Steelers at 9-8, still having a winning season with Mike Tomlin. And then number 4 was the Cleveland Browns at 7-10. So based on what has happened this offseason, what is your guys' prediction on who will be the AFC North Division champion?
I'd be remiss if I didn't run it back with my Bengals. I still think they're the best, most talented team top to bottom. I just feel like, they've got everything clicking in the right spot. Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, like that team is just locked and loaded. Joe Mixon coming back for at least one more year, it seems like. I know they lost some IJP Ryan, they lost Hayden Hurst, but those are some ancillary players that I don't think necessarily change a lot of the trajectory of the team. And I think, too, with the way this offseason is going, with Joe Burrow being able to, actually have a full offseason program instead of having an appendectomy in July, I think is only going to help the bond and help them come out of the gate a little less stale and cold as they have the last 2 seasons. So, yeah, I think the Bengals run it back for a third year of a championship in a row, so to speak.
Yeah, I can't disagree with Andrew here, man. I got the Bengals as my AFC North Division champ as well. Somebody's just got to take them off their throne, and I don't see it happening this year. So I like them to repeat as champs here.
Yeah, I definitely a consensus between us guys here. I agree. I think Cincinnati Bengals will be the division champs for the AFC North. Will be interesting to see how Orlando Brown now coming in as the offensive tackle there for them. Be interesting to see how he does. Obviously, he had great success with the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm also curious to see how their secondary does with the Bengals, because you've had Jesse Bates and Von Bell, who were starters for the Bengals, no longer there. They're going to be replaced. I believe Dax, you would correct me if I'm wrong here, Andrew, but I believe Dax Hill will be stepping in, as well as I'm trying to remember another guy they may have be stepping in. But yeah, that'll be interesting to see. They're going to be definitely have some more developmental players in that spot and not the starters that they're used to. So that'll be interesting to see what happens there.
Yeah, and we got Nick Scott as a free agent, who I think is going to be pretty good to fill in the other safety roles. So, yeah, Dax, I think, did pretty well last year. I am excited for that. And then we got Chidobe coming back from his injury. And we got Cam Taylor-Britt, who did well. We still got Eli Apple and Mike Hilton on the roster. So I feel like the secondary on the Bengals is still relatively robust. It did well last year. It held up when it needed to. I felt like the defense was kind of an unsung hero of that team. And obviously losing guys like Jesse Bates and Von Bell and on the defense is not great. Nobody wants to have that happen. It is kind of a decision you have to make with where you put your money, and deciding to put the money in the offensive line with Orlando Brown, I think is the decision that didn't shock anybody. And I think most Bengals fans and fantasy fans are pretty happy about it. So I think it was the right decision, and potentially letting up some more points on defense might just make for a more exciting offense. So could end up being a bang, bang, win-win kind of situation. So I'm excited for that.
So guys, heading over to the wild card team, do you think any teams get a wild card spot in the AFC North?
Well, I'll go first in here and just say Ravens. I think again, I just think that their team is probably the next best, and I think it's pretty clear that they're the next best. So I wouldn't be shocked if they get another a playoff berth out of this with a wild card, just because it's still Lamar Jackson. They got Greg, not Greg Monken. Am I thinking of the wrong Monken? Todd Monken. That's what it is. So Monken's on the offense now. They got Odell Beckham Jr. They got a pretty good passing attack, right? Mark Andrews is still Mark Andrews. So I feel like the way that their team is trending, they should do well. So I wouldn't be shocked to see them in the wild card. And then the wild card of wild cards for me is the Browns. I think the Browns squeak in there and pull off a wild card as well, which again is a little bit of a ballsy pick in the AFC and how strong all the other divisions are and everything. But I wouldn't be shocked with Deshaun Watson having a full offseason program this time and no suspended games, and all the drama 1 year further behind him. I think he's able to actually focus on football this time. Nick Chubb obviously going to be getting the ball a lot for the Browns, and Amari Cooper's still there. There was some talk, I'm not sure if it's legitimate, about DeAndre Hopkins going there. That would change that whole team. And I just think that they end up putting together something that works this year. As much as I hate to say it, both the Ravens and Browns make the playoffs with the Bengals, and the AFC North has 3 teams in the playoffs. It makes my skin crawl saying it, but I just feel like that's what's bound to happen. It's going to be the hardest path ever for the Bengals to win a Super Bowl if they're ever going to have a chance. And I got a feeling there's going to be a divisional matchup in the playoffs before we face the Chiefs or Bills, whatever it is, in the championship. So I'm just kind of leaning into it at this point. You know what I mean? Just like, I think it's going to happen. I hate it. Let's predict it. Then when it doesn't happen, I'm okay. You know?
That makes sense. Yeah. My wild card pick is the Baltimore Ravens as well. I just think even with Lamar Jackson getting hurt last year, they still found a way to get the wild card. Almost took out your Bengals in the first round of the playoffs last year as well with Huntley. So I think with the, potentially full season with Lamar, we'll see how he does with the passing attack and the new offensive coordinator. But that's where I'm going to leave it as far as wildcard teams in the North. But I do agree. I think the Browns are a really interesting team in the North and definitely will be, competing to fight for a wildcard spot as well.
So I'm just going to put this out there that I'm not extremely confident about this, but this is what my gut's telling me. I'm going to go with the Browns making the wild cards, getting the wild card spot out of the North. I'm with Andrew. I think they could be a really sneaky team. I think Deshaun Watson, now that he has, after everything that transpired in his first couple games in Cleveland, I think he'll have a full training camp. He'll be able to be really instill in that offense. I think that offense is going to be completely changed. It definitely seems that they're going to be more pass-oriented than run-oriented. So to me, I really like what the Browns are going to do. Plus, they have an easier schedule than the other teams. I think the easiest is the Steelers, from what I can tell. Then it goes Browns, and then I think it's Bengals, and then Ravens. And then that's all I got. I only think it's going to be the Browns. I'll explain a little more why I think that, but I'm going to say the Browns get the wild card spot from the North.
I don't hate it clearly because I picked for them to be one of mine, so I don't think it's that ballsy. But not having the Ravens is the more ballsy part of that pick. So I like that. I'd be fine with
definitely.
That. Yeah.
Less team to worry about.
Yeah. So for the teams that missed the playoffs, so Andrew, you said that. So you only have the Steelers missing. Why do you have the Steelers missing the playoffs?
I just feel like if you're looking at anything to, kind of pin your hat on or kind of say, like, well, what's the one thing I would say is the most likely to get you to the playoffs? It's quarterback play. And I feel like the Steelers have the lightest or the easiest or the, weakest quarterback play with Kenny Pickett. I do think he does well this year with Pickens, which is where the name flop came into my head. I think Pickens sees a step up on that offense. I think Deontay Johnson's going to be okay this year. I'm still kind of avoiding him at his price in fantasy. We'll see where it lands in redraft and all that, but I'm not really acquiring him in Dynasty at this point. I just feel like whoever's got him is probably really into him. But again, back on the subject, Steelers, I don't think are a bad team. They did bolster their line. They still got Najee Harris. I like what they're going to do. I just think the streak finally comes to an end for Mike Tomlin. I think they finish under 500. I just feel like the other teams with Lamar, Deshaun, and Joey B, those 3 quarterbacks are, potentially top 10 in the NFL if you look at them right. And Kenny Pickett just isn't. And I just think if you're going to play, all of those teams are going to play each other 6 times. And I just don't see it happening that they win, more than they lose out of those. And that's just going to hurt their standing. So if they get 5 out of 6 losses, then you're staring down the barrel of a really rough season. So it's not really as much of an indictment on how bad Pittsburgh is. It's just how good the rest of this AFC North is, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. Even though said the Browns are going to make it. There's no doubt they got a talented roster, but at the end of the day, a max of 3 teams could possibly make it out of division, really. And, I just don't see that. I got the Steelers last, mostly because Kenny Pickett is their quarterback as well. Just feel like they have the weakest quarterback play in the division. And that's kind of how I felt with the rankings, even with having the Browns at 3. Still have my concerns about Deshaun Watson. I'll take the wait and see approach. But I kind of ranked them in terms of who I thought had the best quarterbacks.
Yes, I'm agreeing with you guys. I think that's why I have the Steelers getting last. I think you're right, Andrew. This might be the year where that record is broken because I don't know how you can be that good of a team in a division when you have the worst quarterback in a division, and it's not really even close.
Yeah.
And now they did, like you said, they upgraded their offensive line. They could go, ground and pound with a really solid defense because their defense is very stout still.
Sure.
But I just think at the end of the day, just the way the NFL is becoming more of a passing league. I think at the end of the day, I think Kenny Pickett's just a glorified game manager. Personally, I just don't really know if he has it in him. As far as the Ravens, that's the team that was the ballsy pick for me. Why I didn't have them in. I wanted to put them in, and I think they are really good. I could be really wrong about this, but I think it may take a year for them to get adjusted to that offense. I think people are just ready to crown them because they've got Zay Flowers now. They've got Odell Beckham. They're completely changing the offense. They're bringing in this new offensive coordinator. But how do we know if they're going to gel right from the beginning? What if it takes a couple games for them to really kind of get in a groove? And by the time they finally get in a groove, I think that the margin for a wild card spot, it could be a 1 or 2 game margin. So they can't afford to lose these games early on. So, and they have a pretty difficult schedule as it is. So, is Lamar capable of kind of manning that offense? I think he is, but again, this is a completely different style of offense versus the Greg Roman style of offense. So I think there's just going to be some growing pains. I think people are just thinking immediately. I think I wouldn't be surprised. There's probably some people out there that think that the Ravens are actually going to beat the Bengals for the division. I think there's a lot of hype towards that. But I just
all my Baltimore friends think that. Yeah, all my Ravens friends are like, "Oh, this is going to be a piece of cake. We're going to take you this year." I'm like, "Okay, well, we'll see. Let's put it on the field." But yeah, Ravens are a good team. I mean, I don't want to interrupt too much and take a lot of your thunder, but I think Ravens are still a good team. They're probably, I would almost be willing to say they're the biggest variance. They could have the 5-12 kind of season and just kind of be a dud the whole way as they adjust, or they could be 12-5 and dominant and just perfect fit. Again, we've seen this before with other teams where they bring in veteran receivers and it just doesn't always gel, right? Like kind of putting together the top talent isn't necessarily the same as fielding a good team. Like they still have to play together. They still have to be able to, not be dramatic. And Odell Beckham is one of the more dramatic players we've seen. So I'm a little nervous in that regard, but and he's a little rusty, right? Let's be honest. He hasn't played in a while since the last time I think we saw him was against my Bengals in the Super Bowl, which broke my heart. I don't want to get into it, but I still think the Ravens are a good team and they have a lot of good players. We'll see how they show up, right? We're going to learn a lot about them as they take the field.
So transitioning over to our fantasy football site, because we are a show that talks about fantasy, dynasty, you name it. So guys, I want to go through each team and I want you guys to share a sleeper for each team. So let's start with your Cincinnati Bengals, Andrew. What sleeper do you guys think the Bengals have?
Well, it's tough on a team like the Bengals for fantasy. I mean, everybody already knows about Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and even Tyler Boyd. I don't think you can really call him a sleeper anymore either. And Joe Burrow, not a sleeper, right? I mean, it's just kind of like these are all names. So the one that I've been kind of hanging my hat on, which again is truly the name of a sleeper, is Chris Evans. There's been some talk this offseason when they drafted Charlie Jones that he was going to be the punt and kick returner, which I think he's got skills to do. But in the NFL, still, you have to supplant the guy doing it, and that's Chris Evans as of right now. I know there's been a lot of talk about Joe Mixon being the guy and not having P. Ryan, like I mentioned before. And then who backs him up, though? Who's the second guy? Well, they drafted Chase Brown, who's a 5th-round pick out of Illinois. Not a scrub by any means. He's better at this than I'll ever be at anything. But I just don't know if a rookie is the right fit here. And I think it's between Travion Williams and Chris Evans. And I just think the way that it's gone so far with Travion, he's had a number of chances to see the field or to make a dent and just hasn't done that. And it's been with this team. It's been with this offense. It's been with this regime, and he just hasn't made a dent. So I'm not necessarily saying it isn't Travion. I'm just picking one and just sort of saying, like, I don't know, one of these backup running backs is going to be somebody. So especially in Dynasty, some of them might be on waivers. And this is kind of goes back to an old theory that a lot of people have. I'm not the first on this. I think actually Scott Connor coined the term, but like anyone on a 53, like any RB on a 53, like as long as you're on a roster, I want you on my fantasy team, because we've seen it time and time again where running backs just sort of blow up out of nowhere due to injuries or bye weeks or whatever, right? We see a whole lot of chaos in the fantasy scape. So if you're on a deeper roster dynasty league, I mean, drafting or trading for whatever for running backs can be tricky, but finding them on waivers when it's 0. I mean, Chris Evans is on waivers in a lot of leagues. Travion Williams is on waivers in a lot of leagues, but I'm leaning on Chris Evans because he's got the kick return chops. He's played more with this team. The coaches know him better. They might trust him a little more. And if anything, you're looking to break a tie between 2 veterans who haven't done much and a rookie. You might just give it to the guy that's not going to fumble, and that might be Chris Evans. So, I mean, again, it's a crapshoot, but that's kind of the name I've been going to bat for the Bengals as a sleeper. And it's a deep one because there aren't that many little ones. It's all or nothing with this guy.
Yeah. It's an interesting case you make for Chris Evans. My sleeper I was going to bring up was, that rookie Chase Brown, actually, just because, like you said, just looking at the offense, it's tough to find a sleeper on this Bengals offense that people don't already know. P. Ryan is left. The RB2 spot is open. They did get Chase Brown in the 5th round. It's not the highest of draft capital, but, Travion Williams, as you mentioned, just has gotten some opportunities, just hasn't done a whole lot with it. And your case for Chris Evans makes sense, but if they like the rookie, I could see them going with him as the RB2 and maybe takes up some of that P. Ryan role we've seen in years past.
So for me, my sleeper is tight end Irv Smith. I think Irv Smith is a very athletic tight end. He just hasn't been able to stay healthy. And Hayden Hurst is no longer there. He left in free agency and went to Carolina. So you're talking about just Hurst alone. You're talking about 68 targets up for grabs. So to me, if Irv Smith can stay healthy, I think
that's a big if.
It's a big if, but that's why he's a sleeper, though, right? Because more than likely he probably doesn't turn out to be the guy. But if he can stay healthy, I think he's super athletic, and I think they could use him in a great way. And I think he could. I don't think he could ever be tight end 1 territory, but maybe verge. I think high tight end 2 possibility with him. So heading over to the Ravens, your guys' sleepers for them.
So my sleeper on the Ravens I was going to go with is Rashad Bateman, actually. I know a lot of the talk has been on Odell Beckham Jr. coming in and the new flashy toy and Zay Flowers. Bateman missed all of last year with an injury. He's still a very talented wide receiver. Lamar, has experience with him, and I think people are kind of forgetting about him, and I think he could come back and be one of those post-hype sleeper type of players.
I don't mind that answer. I mean, I think Bateman is an interesting pick for sleeper because some people might argue he's not really a sleeper, right? Like it's kind of what I said, like Tyler Boyd and all this, but you're probably right in the sense that he's going to outperform his ADP. I think you're probably fine on that logic.
Yeah, that's my thinking.
Yeah, mine's a little deeper because I'm in dynasty mode. My sleepers are, comatose at this point. But I tend to go with either Gus Edwards in 1 QB leagues because, again, J.K. Dobbins has been injured before, and I was just talking about running backs. It's always good to have one of those. It looks like, for now anyway, he's the backup to J.K. Dobbins and kind of the clear backup. And they re-signed Gus Bus before last year, so they definitely like the guy. But in Superflex leagues, I'm liking Tyler Huntley a lot. I just feel like we saw Lamar Jackson get injured, but then also not really be in a hurry to come back. And that was before he had a contract. I mean, I'm worried about, more about what's between the ears with Lamar Jackson. And if he gets hurt in any way, he might decide to kind of, I'll set this one out. The whole AFC North has a pretty easy schedule coming into the season. We face the AFC South, or I think you guys have talked about them before. And it's just like they're facing teams like the Texans and the Jaguars and the Colts. I mean, like those are teams that I could see them getting up early to and just kind of letting it coast, or even just putting Huntley in the third quarter. Or Lamar Jackson got kind of dinged up the week before, but let's just bench him and play Huntley anyway. So in Superflex leagues, I'm going with benching Tyler Huntley in every league. Put him on my bench if I can. Get him as a throw-in. I just think there's enough value there in that offense. He's familiar. He could be a real deep sleeper that could either win you a week or you could turn him around in a big trade that the week that kind of thing looks like it might happen. So, again, Gus Edwards is kind of a sleeper. I think it makes sense to call him that, but a real deep comatose sleeper is Tyler Huntley for me.
Yeah, I think it's going to be tough because I feel like my sleeper is not going to meet your guys' sleepers. My sleeper has been in hibernation, though. So maybe you'll get a sense of who I'm going to say with that.
I like where you're going with this.
But my sleeper is Odell Beckham. I think
for
me, obviously he has the name pedigree, but he didn't play for an entire year. So I do like that because, well, I mean, obviously I would have rather have him play, but for him to have that full time of recovery, I think his knee, he's going to be I mean, they gave him all that money. He better do something. But I just think, like, if you're going to change the offense and you're going to bring in a guy like Odell Beckham, then you would think that he's going to garner a lot of targets. And so I feel like me included, like, I'm not like enthusiastic about him. When's the last time we've had a Ravens receiver even be a wide receiver one? I mean, maybe within the past few years. I mean, you had Marquise Hollywood Brown, who was okay. He was good, but he was never great. Can Lamar Jackson really support a wide receiver one? Obviously, Odell Beckham has the name. I think he's possibly capable. He is kind of in the later half of his career. I don't know how much more he has left in the tank. But it'll be. That's why I think he's a sleeper, because I think a lot of people are like, I don't know. Like, I think he's overlooked, and I overlook him myself. So I think he's definitely a guy to keep an eye on.
I like that pick a lot. At least you didn't say Mark Andrews. I was going to be like, please just don't say like that's. Come on.
Yeah, no, that would.
Who's this Mark Andrews guy? No one's drafting him. Like, I don't know about that one.
So heading over to the Pittsburgh Steelers. What are your guys' sleepers for them?
Yeah, the Steelers are another tough team. I feel like to, find a sleeper on. They have a lot of their offense, pretty much known commodities at this point. I know he's getting some hype this offseason, but I'll go with Jaylen Warren. I think the Steelers like him, and I think he could get utilized more than what people think. He's definitely shown to be that explosive player in spells of Najee Harris. I know you don't like this one, Steve, because you believe in the volume of Najee, but if the Steelers don't like just watching Najee get the ball and just fall forward for 3 yards every play, maybe they want some pop, and that's Jaylen Warren to spell him and get that big play guy. So I think for where he's getting drafted, I think he could provide more value from his ADP right now.
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely going to be one of mine because you know how much I love running backs, even just from the last 20 minutes we've been talking. So Jaylen Warren's the obvious pick for me, right? So I'll pivot a little bit and just say Kenny Pickett. I know I kind of mentioned before he's the weakest quarterback in this division, but he's still going to be in games that he's going to have to throw. I think a lot of the time you look at game narrative and game scripting and all that. I think this team has a chance to be playing from behind a lot. And even if you're playing from behind with a bad quarterback, we saw it a lot with James Winston, comes to mind, like somebody who's not afraid to air it out. And I don't think this team is going to abandon ship on Pickett, even if he plays badly this year. He was their guy. I don't think they have a lot of depth behind him that is really going to worry me, which means his leash isn't that short, which helps in a sense where he's still young. He's figuring things out. They don't really have the kind of offense that they can lean on him to do that, but they might have to. And that could mean a lot of extra time points for Pickett. Again, if they're down 48-10, against the Bengals or the Ravens or something, I wouldn't be shocked to see them launching long balls to Pickens, and one of those needs to land, and bam, you got yourself 10 points for the quarterback, right? So I just feel like Pickett's kind of one of those guys going under the radar, especially in 1 QB leagues where he probably won't get drafted. He might even be a streamer this year in redraft leagues. And in Dynasty, I still think you can get him at a discount or at least a slightly discounted price in general from where he was. You probably had to spend a first on him because that draft was so, I don't know, bad, I guess. But in the future tense, you could probably still get a first for him because these other drafts are going to be better. People might be willing to pay that. It might not. But again, in Superflex, I think you could do worse than Kenny Pickett as your QB2. So I'm counting that as a sleeper, taking a page out of your book there, Steve, being like, I don't know. I'm maybe changing the definition a little, but I'm counting it because I don't like him. And that to me is sort of a sleeper. So I'll take it.
That's right, Andrew. We're just going with the fly. I like it.
Make it up as we go.
And this is going to continue in that same thread. My sleeper, again, who knows if you'll say it's much of a sleeper, but it's George Pickens. To me, I will take Pickens every time over Deontay Johnson in this year's draft and in Dynasty, 1,000%. To me, I think George Pickens has the big playability. I think he is going to – I don't – usually the third year for a receiver is when they really just take the huge jump. So it may not be next year, might be the third year. But Pittsburgh's been a wide receiver factory. They know how to develop receivers. I think I understand people want to talk about Deontay Johnson and that, it's not realistic. He's gonna get more touchdowns, so obviously he's gonna be better. And I think he'll get maybe a few touchdowns. But I think the guy that you want to have in the offense is George Pickens. I think he's going to take that next step. And that's why for me, I like I said, I'm targeting him. He's the number one guy as far as the receivers and the tight end goes that I would want in that offense.
No, I like that pick a lot. I think, again, like I mentioned it with Pickett, but yeah, you're on the right page as me. And just for the sake of argument, because again, I want to mention this at some point anyway, and this is as good a time as any. Deontay Johnson is currently ranked as 29th receiver in ECR for the season on Fantasy Pros, and George Pickens is 36. I kind of think those are flipped. You know what I mean? Like I'm with you. I'd much rather have Pickens over Deontay. So I like that pick, especially as a quote unquote sleeper where we're defining it ourselves. I think Pickens is a fine choice for that.
Well, I think the reason why is people will say, well, look at how many targets Deontay Johnson got, right? He had 147 last year compared to Pickens' 84. But we know that, Pickens, he's a different type of receiver. He's got a higher ADOT, right? I mean, he's just going to get targeted down the field, but he's going to have more of those big plays. Whereas
that upside is hard, man. Yeah, that upside's hard to replace. So I'm kind of with you. If you're going to pick anybody, you might as well get somebody that you're not going to like starting, but you're going to be like, well, it's all or nothing with this guy. And I think that's Pickens over Deontay for me. I'm with you.
And that's the thing for me too, just from a fantasy football strategy. I'm always the type that says ceiling. I want a ceiling. You need studs, and you want guys who are going to break out. You're not just going to win with just guys who are just floor. You need some guys who are going to get you that ceiling.
Agreed, for sure.
So going over to the last team, the Cleveland Browns. What are your sleepers there, guys?
Yeah, apparently I like running backs. I'm going to go with Jerome Ford. And, just looking at the depth chart, Kareem Hunt's gone. Nick Chubb is there. He's still going to be, a volume monster. But Jerome Ford, I expect him to kind of take the passing work that Kareem Hunt had. And if anything happens to Nick Chubb, I think Jerome Ford could be, a fine guy to step in and get you fantasy production.
Definitely a sleeper. I like where your head's going on that one. I actually think Nick Chubb is going to ball out this year, but you're right. If anything happens to Chubb, it's all Ford, and that's a little scary. But again, as a bench running back, you can definitely do a lot worse. Opportunity is going to be there if he gets the chance. Mine is in a similar depth, I guess, but not the same position. It's Donovan Peoples-Jones. I know a lot of people are talking about Elijah Moore. There was this huge kind of hubbub about this. Obviously, Amari Cooper's the number one, and Elijah Moore becomes the two, and they've got David Njoku as their tight end, and we just talked about Chubb and Ford. I think DPJ has a chance to out-touch and out-target Elijah Moore, and I think he's going significantly later in drafts. Again, one of those guys that you might not even have to draft if your league is shallow enough. And I think that there's a very real chance that he still gets 80 targets, and I think that kind of thing, you don't find that on a lot of teams. He probably would be the third target if he gets that many behind Njoku and Cooper. But I just think he beats out Elijah Moore, who we really haven't seen, put it on paper like he was supposed to. And so with that Jets team not really using him, and then, this trade or what have you, that, moves over to Cleveland, I'm not really jazzed about Moore that much. And actually, on a sort of related note, I just made a trade last week, actually, in the Dynasty League where I traded away Elijah Moore for Roschon Johnson. And I'm just like, I'm thinking Roschon has a better ability to get points. He's got an easier opportunity ahead of him. Running back's always kind of brutal when it comes to that anyway. But I'm just kind of out on Elijah Moore. So if I'm out on Elijah Moore, I got to be in on someone else. That's DPJ. And I just think, again, the low cost, the comatose sleeper style that I've been going on, I think that you can do worse. So that's kind of where my head goes when I think of sleepers.
Wow, I got to tell you, I'm pretty surprised about your take on Elijah Moore. I'm actually a huge Elijah Moore fan.
I'm on the outside. I'm not saying everyone agrees with me. I am one of the few detractors. I think a lot of people like Elijah Moore, so I'm not hating that. I'm just saying we're like, I don't know. I'm just not sold.
Yeah, I think for me, I attribute it to the New York Jets' colossal failure in utilizing him, because I think when you saw him play and play well, you were like, oh, okay, he's a good player. So, and to me, like, you're starting to see him having reps with Deshaun Watson. To me, I don't know. I just that chemistry that they're building. I don't know. I just think he could be really good. So he would be a sleeper for me. But I'll go a little more on the comatose side. But I like Jerome Ford as well, Joe. I think Kareem Hunt. I think it's like I told you about. I feel that Nick Chubb is a little bit of fool's gold. I think people are seeing that, Kareem Hunt's gone, so now he's going to have this extra usage. and I'm not so convinced. I think that Jerome Ford, I think they like him a lot. I think he could step in and do a similar amount of production that Kareem Hunt did. And so I think people are going to overdraft in going for Chubb, and then they're going to find out that he's not going to actually get as much volume as they were hoping he was going to get. And if he goes down, this offense, you've seen the likes of Dearness Johnson in the past, right? If they just get that opportunity, they're going to run with it. So I really like Jerome Ford.
Yeah, and you mentioned Dearness Johnson. He's also gone now. So, I mean, that's why it's really Jerome Ford. And, I forgot to mention it earlier, but the Browns liked him so much last year. They were trying to figure out how to line him up at slot receiver just to get him the ball.
Right.
But to your Donovan Peoples-Jones point, the addition of Cedric Tillman, that doesn't scare you off at all? Or
No, and I mean there is some logic there, of course, with rookie receivers and all this. But they had a guy last year, David Bell. Remember, David Bell was supposed to be the guy, and it crickets, got nothing. I'm not saying that the same is going to happen with Cedric Tillman. I just feel like DPJ's proven it. I think he's earned some offensive touches. He's earned the trust of that coordinator and that offensive scheme and everything. And I think with Deshaun Watson coming in, he's going to be distributing the ball more. We saw that last season, actually, which is why Chubb was kind of not as good or not as productive, because Deshaun Watson came in and didn't hand the ball off as much, would much rather throw it. So I just feel like DPJ is ahead of Tillman on the depth chart, even though he's a rookie and he's got some upside like we were talking about. I potentially, and kind of in this season alone, like the upside to DPJ a little bit more just because of the way things have fallen. So again, not as much hate on Tillman, just I like DPJ more.
Yeah, makes sense.
So guys, I want you to give me one bust for the AFC North Division. You could just, it could be rapid fire, or you can, give me a monologue as to why you think this player is not going to be doing well this season.
That's a tough one. Well, okay, so I'll go with what my gut tells me, and I'm not sure if this is true. Like, this is just where it's not based in fact. Let's just put it, I just want to preface this for anyone listening. I don't have a long diatribe about why. I just have this odd, sneaky suspicion that David Njoku is going to be a bust for the Browns. I think the way the tight end landscape is looking, it's, 2 or 3 guys at the top, and then it's kind of blah after that. And I think a lot of people are reaching on David Njoku just because they want something, they want upside, and we talked about that. I don't know. He hasn't really wowed me. I think he's more of a floor player than an upside player. I just don't see him with those, 3 touchdown weeks very often. He might get 5 catches for 28 yards and a touchdown, and that's fine. But I don't know. I kind of want someone better than that if I'm going to be reaching at tight end. And I'd much rather just wait, possibly 10 rounds and get a guy like Sam Laporta or Gerald Everett, like one of those other, like you're pretty much getting the same output without having to waste a, potentially premium pick. So I don't know. A tight end is kind of a scapegoat, cheap shot kind of a thing for a bust, because they're all kind of busts. You know what I mean? But I'm going with David Njoku just because I guess I just don't feel the vibe.
Yeah, it's crazy, Andrew. I was literally going to say he was my bust. I had it written down and prepared. I know Steve's not going to like it. He's a big David Njoku guy. But, I'd seen that even though he had the top 8 finish last year, do you know that when Watson took over, he only had more than 5 receptions in 1 game during that span? I just, I think with the addition of Elijah Moore in the offense, just more targets potentially away from Njoku, I think he's a bust for me as well.
Yeah, that's some good logic there from you two. I'd say my bust is, and he's a common bust for me, so you'll know where I'm going with this show. But it's J.K. Dobbins. I've never been a Dobbins fan. To me, Dobbins is coming off of that injury. He's not been used as a passing threat. So you're talking about him only being utilized in first and second down. And then you've got Lamar Jackson, who's going to, obviously, he may not run as much, but he's still going to vulture some touchdowns and some he's going to do read options. He's going to run the ball. And that offense most likely was changing based on what we're expecting. I think it's going to be more passing oriented. They're going to let Lamar, really make plays and have all those receivers out there. I mean, you don't sign Odell Beckham to what they sign him to, and then also draft a first-round receiver in Zay Flowers if you're not trying to change the identity of the team. Not to mention, like you said, Joe, they've got Rashad Bateman, but Devin Duvernay. People forget about Devin Duvernay. He actually, was a rosterable player last year. that did decent. And you got Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely. So how much are they really going to commit to the running game? So I'm out on Dobbins, and that's my bust.
Well, I'm out on him at cost, so I'm right there with you. I feel like a lot of people are looking at him as like a running back 1, high end running back 2, and I don't know. There's others in that range I'd usually draft ahead of him. I don't mind getting him at a value or something if he's going off the board as like the 20th or 23rd or whatever. Like I'm fine grabbing a guy at that stage, but yeah, I'm with you. Dobbins seems fragile to me. And again, just to kind of hit a note too on Njoku again, he was kind of propped up by a couple of different factors, but he only played in 14 games and had 10 points per game as a PPR like player. I mean, I don't know. If you're looking at 10 points per game, you can go all the way down to tight end 19 at 8 points per game. You're only missing 2 points per game, and it's not like it's 29 and 27. I mean, you're looking at 10 to 8, and that's 10 and 19 for points per game, which is Hayden Hurst. You know what I mean? Like I don't know. I feel like I'm fine to lose those 2 points a game there and gain it in my flex spot because you're probably getting a better receiver or running back just because of the draft spot. So, just to kind of get back on that, I know we mentioned he was, tight end 8 points per game. Not faulting him for that. It's just that's how bad tight end is.
So that concludes our show breaking down the AFC North Division for the upcoming NFL season. Before we sign off, Andrew, thanks so much for coming on the show. Where can others find your great work?
Yeah, I always tell people you can find me on Twitter at AndrewHallFF. I post most of my articles there and retweet when we go live on Dynasty Junkies on Thursday nights at 9:30 Eastern, usually around then. So come hang out in the chat, ask us questions. We love doing finding people trades and everything like that too on Dynasty Junkies. So follow me on there too at Dynasty Junkies. We always go live and put it on Twitter. And then again, thanks so much guys for having me. This is a great time. And again, anytime you need someone to talk about the Bengals, I do it anyway. So I might as well be recorded. So it's just a good time.
All right, we may have to take you up on that in the future.
Yeah, definitely.
But if you enjoyed this video, we are a new channel. So we do ask you to show your support by subscribing to our channel. You can also comment below on who you think will win the AFC North. You can also follow us on Apple and Spotify podcasts as well. If you haven't watched it yet, we just recently had a video of Ryan Talbot covering the AFC East. We're going to be doing the rest of the divisions. Our next one will be the AFC South. So thank you so much for watching, and until next time.